Start to wrap up your last thoughts and ideas. All right. So, for the warm-up, I asked you to associate certain objects, places, people, things, ideas with homes, as with the idea of home as a way to think of examples for this idea. So, what do you think? Home. What reminds you of home? Yeah, Andrew, yourself.
This might seem like sad, but it's not really meant to be sad. I put emptiness, but mainly because every time I would get home, it's mainly late at night, and everyone else is upstairs, either sleeping or just chilling in the bedroom. So I come home and all the lights are off, obviously, and there's no one in the living room and stuff. So I'll just go do my own stuff, shower.
Right. It's a deep idea to have something that's empty. There's this space that. Do you feel like you need to fill it, or do you feel like there's satisfaction in the emptiness and the availability of the space? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel more satisfied, and I don't feel a negative feeling to it, because it's I come home from a long day outside, and then you just open the door, and it's just it's my home, but it's there's nothing there, and I'm just relief, kind of. It's just oh, I'm home now.
Right. So you definitely associated it with a feeling. Other feelings, or maybe objects, people, places, ideas. Yes, ma'am.
To me, home is the soft toys that I have, aside from when I was barely just born to now. I kept all of my stuffed toys. I mean, I've definitely thrown some away or given it away, but most of them I still have. And when I look at them, because I have a card, when I look at them, I know exactly which one's from which place. Because as a Korean that's never really lived in Korea and has constantly moved around, I have toys from countries that I've briefly visited, maybe for a week, for vacation with families, or toys that are from where I have to live for 5 to 6 years, Malaysia. And there's also toys that show the culture of that country, Taiwan. I used to have this baby elephant stuffed toy that I used to have when I used to live with them when I was a child. And I think that's what home is, because there's always constant change around me, because I have to move a lot. But the fact that the toys don't ever change is kind of a comforting thing when I think about it.
It's a really interesting idea that home represents this constant change versus something that's static, something that's steadfast. One thing I forgot. In the last video, it was very hard to hear you as a result of the air con. So hopefully it won't get blazingly hot in here, but I don't think it will, because it's still pretty cold. But hopefully we'll be able to hear each other a little bit better now. Yeah, I think that this is a really good totem, a representation for this idea that though home may change its physical location, there's something static and steadfast about it. Yeah, good. Other people put their fingers on anything like that. Yeah, get us what you saying, and we'll just go down the line.
I associate my bed with the idea of home because, you can have different beds, but at the end of the day, it's a nice place to just kind of rethink through everything, and it's kind of like a safe haven too, because you can just stay in your thoughts and you don't have to really associate with the rest of the world. You can just stay in your little own world and think about everything.
Beautiful. I love that word as a safe haven. Haven is a really nice way of thinking about home, is this location that seems to be almost like a sanctuary that's separate from and has some kind of indelible personal quality to it. Nicely said. Moving on down the line. Andrew, you had another one?
Well, mine is kind of the same as Belle's, with the stuffed toys, except mine is the green blanket. Because ever since I was in Houston, like I always had the same blanket, which was that one green blanket. And then when I moved here to Thailand, I didn't really think about it. But then like apparently my parents brought it. And I'm like, oh, like, I got it and I still use it like today.
Yeah.
I used it last night.
Yeah. Personal question, but if you don't mind,
Yeah.
can you put your finger on the emotion that you had when you realized that your parents brought the blanket?
I felt like, well, I was like amazed, like, oh, you brought it, and then, but I was also like satisfied. Like it's like I see it and it's like, oh yeah, like that's mine. Like I used it like for how many years, and it's still here with me to this day. And it's like, oh, it's been through a lot, like through all the times. Like this is the one thing actually that I still have since Houston.
Yeah, it brings us back to this idea of constant change versus having this kind of static, steadfast object. Yeah, this representation of home. And so this idea of being satisfied also connects really nicely with Chang Rae's object or totem of home, which is food. Because you think about a great meal, what's more satisfying than a great meal, right? Maybe a bed, right? So there is something that's somehow connected with this idea of satisfaction in home. And I think you all are putting your hands on it nicely. Kate and then Sue.
There are two major things that I associate with home. Like one is like old pictures that's hung up on the walls, and another thing is it's more like a scene. Like there's a specific TV series that like our whole family watch, like on these Saturday mornings. So like in the morning, my parents just wake me up and say, "Hey, there's the TV show going on. Like just like come out and watch it." In the living room, we just all gather around, chilling and watching TV.
Nice. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, my wife's family has similar behavior patterns where everybody kind of has their family moment and gathers around the TV. And I definitely had that with my dad as well. There was a set of series that we would watch together. Great. Subin.
In our house, we actually have like series of videos, like based on different years. And I sometimes watch that and I'm kind of surprised how it changed, like my character and like how our families changed. And this is actually very vivid since like this is not it's not static, rather it moves, and it's actually like reminds me like memories. So
Beautiful. They're home movies then, of you and your family.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, there's certainly, you can see this, your own personal development and how you've grown up. But it's interesting that we can keep coming back to these things and looking at them as a kind of representation of what we think of as home. These places, these people, these times. It's really, really important as an anchor to our identities. And I think we see that a lot in this idea of coming home again. What we're going to try to do today in terms of looking at this in a close textual manner is compare and contrast it with the previous reading, Joan Didion's Ongoing Home. First of all, I just want to get kind of a reader response from you all. How did you feel like these two pieces compare? How similar, where do you think their similarities are versus how different and where their differences lie? Just kind of off the cuff, what are your thoughts? Yeah, Kate, get us started.
Like just by looking at the name of the piece as well.
Yeah.
Like after reading both of these pieces, like coming home again feels like the main, like the author is trying to go back to the home, like go back to his original place. Like he's nostalgic about that location and how he goes back and like, it was like that, and it's more like a flashback. Whereas Joan Didion's Ongoing Home, is it? Yeah. Ongoing Home. That's more like, to me it feels like the person's trying to find a new home, because especially how at the end the authors like, oh, the parents cannot provide a home for their child, and they're like, so I just feel like they have to find a new home.
I think that's really well said. And just the way that you said the title kind of sparked something in me. An ongoing home. Like ongoing as
Still going.
yeah, as one word. I never thought of this before. I always pronounced the title as an essay on going home.
Oh.
But and this kind of gets hard linguistically as I say it aloud, but as an ongoing home, it's something that continuously, it's like a continuous tense of something that's finding, something that's progressing, something that's moving on. So this idea of finding versus returning, I think is really well said. Yeah.
I took it a little differently. So I also did focus on the words coming and going instead of ongoing. But in Chang Rae's coming home again, I felt that the overall tone was like he does regret that he didn't spend his time with his mother, and he went to the boarding school. But I also felt like it was, I can't think of the word, but when he's like at that point he's okay with it, and because his mother's passed, like he's okay with it, and like while he does regret and feels sad sometimes, he just kind of embraces the whole life that he already lived through. Well, then like he's kind of like, I forgot the word, but like he's more calmer, and I feel like his overall essay was more positive towards the readers. And then ongoing home was like, it felt more negative because she would be listing all these memories and great life she had with her own family, and then every time she talked about her husband or like barely mentioned her like child, it felt like it was kind of giving me like vibes where like she doesn't like her new family and she just wants to go back home. But she realizes once you leave your home to find a new family, like marry a husband, it's like she does say it's the classic betrayal.
Right.
You can't go back home, and that's why she doesn't say coming home, but going home. Because going sounds like you're leaving someplace and going somewhere, while coming is you're coming back from a place and coming back to like where you were. So it felt more sad and negative.
Yeah, did other people feel the same way? There was definitely a tonal difference in coming home versus going home. Absolutely. I want you to try to play with that as you're thinking about this idea of home. You all did a really nice job of thinking about the objects, the people, the places, the things, the ideas that you would attach with home. And I think to your point about emptiness, it has both connotations, doesn't it? And that's why I asked you that question. Which do you think about it? Do you think of it as a particularly negative feeling? And you said no, you think of it as kind of more positive. Home is that space that has both positive and negative. It has all the fights you ever had with your brothers and sisters and mom, dad, or all the people that you live with, any of the people that you live with, but all the wonderful times that you spent watching your home movies or watching TV, looking at old pictures, or in Chang Rae's case, eating food. So I'd like to turn our attention to that part now, if we could. What role do you think food plays in this particular essay? Why have food be the primary focus in the relationship that he's discussing between his mom and himself? Get a start, Kate.
Because it's the main association he makes with the word home. Because a lot of events that he describes in this passage, he describes about how he goes to a boarding school and then how he comes back, but then like his mother like prepares a good food for him. So like every event that he has experienced like all connects with the specific food that like his mom made.
Good. It's this visible and invisible tie to this cultural, familial connection, to this idea of home. Nice. Yeah, follow up.
I also thought he chose food because, like you said it before, but food is something that everyone agrees on, is something that you enjoy. Like food is, I mean, to most people, like it's something that you can't live with first of all, and
Live without.
good food is good
Yeah.
to anyone.
Yeah.
So I think it gives off like a good memory and overall vibe to anyone that like listens or like talks or like sees food, anything that relates to food. And I think that's why he chose food, to allow the readers to understand like his relationship with his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think he chose food because like as a Korean as well, like society is still very conservative, so mothers are usually like the housewives that take care of the food for the family. They mostly like they think, oh, women belong kind of in the kitchen. So there's times in the essay where he says he wants to stay with his mom when he was a kid. He wants to stay next to her and watch her make the food, but his mom says like, no, you're supposed to go out and play with your friends. I'm supposed to be here and cook the food for you. And I just thought that's mainly the first experiences of food with his mom, and that's how everything ties together. Because his mom would mainly stay in the kitchen, like that would be where she spent most of her time of the day, and therefore that would be where he would see her in most of his memories.
Very nice. Yeah, I think that that's a really important point, and I'm glad that you brought it up. I was gonna think about leaning on you two, and just in terms of your personal responses to the description of food. But I'm really glad you brought that cultural point up, that it's a window into this idea of the culture in which he grows up. And it's important for readers to understand that, yeah, it's nice to read about kimchi and so on, but as a vehicle in the writing to take us to his home, to see his mom and to understand his culture, food is a very useful mechanism for accomplishing that. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Any other ideas? Yeah, Kate, and then yeah, Susan.
I think the symbol food also kind of shows like the development in the characters as well. Because at first like he describes how his mother like cooks the food for him, but then later on as they grow up, like at the end he cooks the food for his mom, and then how his mom cannot eat it because she was so sick.
Yeah.
So like that development of the characters and how like going back to the like flashbacks and thinking about and connecting again to like past memories.
That was hard for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, Susan.
Like for me, I think the food is the only like mean of the connection between like where Chang Rae and his mother, since like although Chang Rae like changes his characters and like while he's like staying abroad, like the food is the only connection that shows like his identity of Korean, and like it's the only thing that he can share with his mother, and
I would absolutely agree that it is a great identifier of Korean identity. It might be one of the only identifiers that he can share with his mom for Korean identity. But he does draw on other connections that he can make with his mom that aren't necessarily Korean. Did we catch those? Maybe you can make the argument that they are Korean too, but they're not traditionally thought of as Korean. Or even in terms of what you were saying in terms of traditional roles.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the traditional role that you might associate with a Korean housewife.
Here?
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
Wasn't it the basketball?
Yeah, basketball.
You wanna talk about that real- yeah.
Basically, like when Chang Rae and his family went to like a park and he wanted to shoot some hoops, he like expected like his dad to like get in like scores, but then he saw his mom like going to the 3-point line and she got it in perfectly.
Yeah.
And then like he was like, whoa, like, my mom is good at basketball. And then he describes how it was him and his dad against his mom, but she was just easily getting in basketball like points.
Yeah. That somewhat complicates this reading of this traditional Korean,
Yeah.
like,
Like the stereotypes of
stereotype, thank you.
yeah, of what a female does and what a male does as like roles in society.
right.
But yeah, like Abisi said, with the basketball story,
Mm-hmm.
that changes everything. Oh my god, yeah, because normally females aren't expected to play such sports. I mean, any sports, but even basketball,
Right.
for an example. And when with his like memory, with his like flashback of how well his mother shot all the
Right.
shots, like he said, every shoot that she shot went in.
Right.
And I think with his description of how he placed the picture of his mom in the championships
Mm-hmm.
alongside all these other like really like well-known players, like he lists the names like Bubbles Hawkins, Pistol Queen. I mean, I don't know them, but because he places her picture along the same shelf with all those other male players, I feel like us readers are allowed, like we get to feel how much respect he had for his mom as well. Like he held her in the same height.
Esteem?
Yeah, with
Mhm.
alongside other players that he very much liked. Cause yeah.
Great. I just want to bring this back to this overall discussion of home. Because absolutely, in the same way that you all have brought up personal connections with this idea of home, that home is a stuffed bed, or home is a green blanket, home also represents, or can be described by the culture that we draw the home from, right? Rayleigh, to your point and to the points that you all have brought up, both embraces this Korean cultural identity through food, but complicates it through his relationship and his specific relationship with his mother and with his father. The incredible expectations that they put on him, that you need to go to Exeter, which is one of the premier boarding schools in the United States, one of the oldest and most well-established boarding schools. It's a school that many students go on to Yale from, for Harvard, etc. It's a very, very, very prestigious private school, very well known. That expectation, which I'm sure many of you can relate to, of you need to absolutely achieve at this extremely high level, but at the same time, you need to be home because this is where family is. You need to go out and play, but at the same time, I cherish the fact that you're learning how to cook in this way. That you're learning about this Korean identity through food, but at the same time, draining 3-point shots. So there's this duality. We might think of as this dual identity that is both cultural and personal. Yeah,
Can I just add a
Please.
little bit?
Yeah.
Like the portion where he talks to his mom, but then she asks him in Korean, but then he replies in English. That portion, I think that portion kind of shows like the duality.
Yeah, nice. Talk us through that very, very briefly. What was the situation there, and how does it show that duality?
I think this is the part where the writer was having a little bit of a frustrated moment to his mom, like, and then he explains that there's kind of phases and stuff, and then how she asked.
What was the frustration?
She asked him to like help her with like asking about the bank things, I guess.
Yeah.
And then since her English was not like perfect, she asked his son to like help her, but then he got frustrated, and then how she talks to him in Korean, but then he replies in English.
Mhm.
And I thought like that was the point to me before I started like analysis part.
Mhm.
It shows kind of like a distinction between the two. But then now that we kind of went through the analysis, I think that portion kind of shows like a duality of the like contradicting like aspects.
Mhm. Remember how we had this idea of the fork in terms of this idea of home sweet home. And the physical location, PHYSICAL, or the house. And there's this potential, this separateness between where we think of as home sweet home, that bed, that comfortable blanket, my little dog, and the physical place where we hang our hats and put up our coats and, you know, spend our nights, whatever. At the same time, there's kind of this duality, just as you're pointing out, between where our culture places us and where our particular family is in between that culture, near that culture, beside that culture, whatever it happens to be. Okay, so I think you're pointing to this, think back to the Rushdie reading that we did that kind of points to this kind of betweenness area and the dual aspect or the duality of this idea of home. I think that linguistic duality is a good example of that. Yeah. Good. I think that this kind of brings us back to our original question with regards to parents and their ability to provide a home for their kids. So we're going to rewrite that essay, and I want you to try to bring in some of the things that you talked about today with regards to what it is that we think of when we think of home. This idea of food, or the various definitions and examples of home that you brought up. Also think about these ideas that there's a positive and a negative to home, and see if we can draw that into how parents might be able to provide that for a child, for you, for others. And think about Ray Lee, think about Joan Didion and other examples of parents, whether they can or cannot provide this home sweet home to their children. Does that make sense? Okay. Any last minute questions before we jump into the time runner? Yes, let's go back on this one.
Yeah.
No,
No, no.
it's just the you can.
No, the writing, so we can also refer both to the coming home again and outgoing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, draw on as much material as you can, but the focus should be on the argument.
Yeah.
Don't worry about so much the analysis of the piece, though do use the piece to support the argument. Does that make sense? You fundamentally want to focus on this question, answering this question, and then using the evidence from this piece and anything else that you can draw on. Anything from pop culture, personal experience, what you've read, what you've seen, plays you've gone to, music you listen to. How does that show this idea that parents can or cannot provide their children with a sense of home? So far, so good? Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering if you have any notebook that I can use.
Yes, I can write a notebook, I think. I think I have yet another notebook. Let me see if I can find it. Meanwhile, if you would please, go ahead and grab if you have it, your notebook.